Athletic performance is an area where genes play a huge role because there's hardly any other genetic discrimination that's tougher than that of competitive sports. Because only people with iron discipline but also the right genes have the ability to achieve Olympic gold. And so I've prepared a few examples where you can see what role genes played in an athlete's career. Priscilla Lopez-Schleep was a hurdles runner, and she was incredibly talented. And this was her physique. So people kept accusing her of doping because, of course, this is not a typical feminine physique that she had. And every doping test that she ever did came back negative. And then scientists looked into it and said, okay, what's happening in this curious case? And they found out that Priscilla had a genetic defect in a gene called LMNA. And this specific, very rare gene defect led to her having more muscle mass and less fat under the skin. And that led to her physique and her extreme talent for this specific chosen sport. So, as I said, this is very rare, but this led her to become the best in her sport in that time. You might have heard about the bodybuilder cows. They're quite interesting. They're called Belgian Blue. And you can see every muscle that they have is around 3 times the natural size. And these cows, they don't get steroids, they don't get hormones or anything, and they don't train. They're just born this way. And this is a curious gene defect that happened because typically cows, as well as humans, have a gene called MSTN, myostatin. And this creates a process where the body tells muscles to stop growing. So we have some genes that say muscle grow, and then myostatin that says stop growing, and these work against each other. So there's a balance, and this balance is how much muscle mass we actually develop in our body. Now, in these cows, this gene is broken. So what happens is the stop growing signal is not there. So we have certain genes that say grow, muscle grow. Myostatin is supposed to say stop growing. This doesn't happen, and so the muscles grow to their maximum size. And of course, for an animal that we breed for meat, that's a great trait. And so this happened in one cow, and then they started propagating that, and now the whole breed has this specific trait. So this is in cows, and it turns out that the world champion in weightlifting, Eddie Hall, who lifted 500 kilograms in 2016, he also has a gene defect in the MSTN gene. And so what happened is he was born with the tendency to already have more muscle mass than others and his competitors. And he still trained incredibly hard and very disciplined, but this gave him an extra boost, and that enabled him to become a champion. Then you might have heard of blood doping. It's a cheating mechanism that athletes, especially endurance athletes, like to do. What they do is they take their own blood, they store it in the fridge, and then before a competition, they reintroduce it. And by that, they increase the amount of red blood cells. Now, red blood cells are the cells that transport our oxygen, so it gives us more stamina. And if you do it right, you can increase the amount of red blood cells by around 10%. And this is the cheating that happens. Now, there was one athlete called Eero Mantiranta. He was a Finn, and he was incredibly enduring. He won gold in Innsbruck with quite a big, people tell me that's quite a big difference to the second best. So he was incredibly enduring in his cross-country skiing, so a very enduring sport. And so scientists looked into it, how can he be so much better than the second best? And it turned out that he had a gene defect in the EPO-R gene that tightly controls how many red blood cells we produce. And so what happens in him is he naturally had 50% more red blood cells than other people. So 5 times more than the cheaters get through their blood doping approach. So he was born with this incredible trait. He always claimed that hard training and discipline led to his success. It's not genetics. And in a way, he's right, because they did the whole family tree, and they actually had quite a few people in his family tree that had this specific trait, but he was the only one that made something out of it. But undeniably, this was the reason, coupled with his hard discipline, that made him a champion. And so all of these are quite rare, but in total, one thing remains true, and that's something that Per-Olof Astrand, a very famous sports physiologist, said, and that is the most important thing for a budding athlete is to choose the right parents, so to be born with the right genes. That's just the biggest factor. It's the natural talent that you're born with, as we've seen in these cases. Now, as I said, these are very rare, but there are quite a lot of genetic aspects that are common that influence all of us and that do play a role if we want to make the most out of our athletic performance training. And so we're going to look into that aspect now. When we developed this report, and that's around 500 pages long now, so it's a very, very comprehensive test, the most comprehensive that we've developed so far. We interviewed athletes and we said, okay, what kind of questions do you have for training, for getting better? And these are all of the questions that we got. So what are my strengths and weaknesses? So am I different? What am I good at? How do I train? How do I measure progress? How can I regenerate faster? How many calories should I eat? What kind of macronutrients? What foods are suitable? What should I eat? What nutrients and micronutrients do you need? And what sports supplements, creatine and so on, which ones make sense? So those are all really valid questions that athletes have. And our attempt was to answer all of this coupled with your genetic traits, and we would then convert that into a training program that gets the best out of your genetic basis and to answer all of these questions for you. So if we start off with the question, what is my talent? And here you can see this is a cutout of the report. So you can see all of these bar charts. Those are genetic traits that we measure. So you're born with good or bad or somewhere in between. So for example, blood parameters. This person has an average tendency for testosterone. So some people have a tendency for more testosterone in the blood, others lower. So that's already a difference where you have a tendency. Then the next one is creatine kinase, lactate levels, and so on. Then we have psychological factors, body weight, health impact, recovery, the nutrients should be taking, muscle building. Are you a marathon runner or a sprinter? All the way to injury risks. And we're going to look at this example here now, and that is the talent for muscle fibers that you're born with. So there's a specific gene called ACTN3, and this gene comes in two forms. One of them is power, that's for sprinting, and the other one is endurance. It can go a long time. And this is very interesting because if you have the power version, this gene instructs your body to produce lots of white muscle fibers. Now, white muscle fibers are great. They are big and strong, voluminous, while the red muscle fibers created by the endurance version, they are long and thin. They're red because they have lots of blood vessels and lots of oxygen being transported. But you can see it doesn't look very strong. And so you're born with one or the other gene, and that then balances or creates the balance of what you're producing in your muscles. And if you have this, they are fast, they are strong, that's great for weightlifting, for sprinting. They react really quickly, but they run out of oxygen or nutrients very quickly. So they tire very quickly. Sprinting, great, because that's over in 30 seconds, but then you're running out of everything with these muscle fibers. The red muscle fibers, on the other hand, they are slow, they are weak. Sounds bad, but they're really enduring. So they can go for hours while these run out of steam in 30 seconds. And so some people are born with the right muscle fibers for endurance sports long term, and others are born to be sprinters. And this is something that they looked at in studies, how relevant this factor is. And they looked at sprinting ability. In the general population, if you go outside and you just collect the next 1,000 people that you see, around 24% of them will have, statistically, the wrong genes for sprinting. That means they are the marathon runners genetically, not the sprinters. So they lack the optimal genes for sprinting. 24% wrong genes for sprinting. If you now put them under some competition and say, okay, who of you are the best sprinters? So you select out the good sprinters, many of them are not going to make it. They're not going to pass on and reach the level of good sprinters. And what we know is that the tendency with the wrong genes to be in the group that didn't make it is higher than the tendency for people with the right genes. Because while here we have 24% of people with the wrong genes, here in studies we see 8% of people with the wrong genes. So still some with the wrong genes made it, but most of them actually didn't make it to the next group. Now, if you go one step further to Olympic level, again, most people don't make it. The tendency with wrong genes is very high here because of the Olympic level sprinters. 100% have the right genes for sprinting. So that means if you're here and you have the wrong genes for sprinting, what does this mean for your career if you say, this is my future, I want to focus on this? If you have the right genes, it just means anything is possible. You're going to have to train hard, but if you train hard and all of the others train just as hard as you, your genes enable you to get further. If you have the wrong genes, sadly, this is what it looks like. So your career will end here. You will never make it to Olympics because no one with the wrong genes ever made it to that level. And so having this information here before you set your whole career up for this is beneficial. And you can focus on, do I want to train my strength? Do I want to train my weaknesses? Or do I try to focus on speed and fast reaction, or on enduring aspects of my football game and so on? So this is relevant information that we're born with that plays a big role. And the more elite you get, the bigger the role this gene has. So that's one aspect. The next one is, how can I recover faster? A very unpopular aspect of training, especially bodybuilders, for example, that want to keep their muscles growing as much as they can. They would love to train every muscle every day, but you typically can't, because your muscles must recover, and they need the time to heal and to build up stronger after you've slightly damaged them during training. So recovery is an issue, and the way that you realize you need to recover is that you don't have quite the strength that you had last training, or you have sore muscles. That's your immune system coming in trying to repair the damage. So faster recovery is critical for athletes that want to progress as fast as possible. Now we're looking at this aspect here, and if you train a muscle really hard, what happens is you put it under a number of different stresses. One of them is oxidative stress. That means the oxygen that you inhale, around 5% of it becomes a toxic substance called free radicals. So this comes in and damages everything. You can imagine it kind of like a fire in a forest. It will put things on fire and it will spread out and cause damage. So that's one of the problems that we have. And the other thing is inflammation. That's what you feel when you have sore muscles. So you've done training, your muscles got very, very fine tears, and then the immune system comes in and says, okay, we need to repair this, and it inflames the muscle. You get sore muscle, you feel the pain, and that's essentially the inflammation. Now, both of these processes are tightly controlled by genes. So we have genes for oxidative stress that gobble up all of these free radicals before they can do any damage. So they protect us from this. And free radicals, by the way, are one of the main causes of aging. So that's why it's a big thing in the beauty industry as well. So the oxidative stress, the free radicals are gobbled up by genes before they can do any damage. So we're protected here, fast recovery, great. Here we have an issue. There are certain genes that are meant to tell the immune system how strongly to react to a certain impulse. And what happens here, the genes make sure there's a little damage, let's not go overboard, let's inflame the tissue a little bit and repair it, and then you have very fast recovery again. So that's how you're hoping to be. But then genetics comes along and makes it all more complicated, because not every one of us has functioning versions of these genes. So they have weird names, so GPX1, SOD2, and so on. So these genes are supposed to protect me, but if they're broken, they don't. So free radicals damage my tissue and cause problems. And the same goes for here. If these genes, these are inflammatory genes, if they are defective, they overshoot. They prime the immune system to be way too aggressive. And so it uses atomic bombs against a small damage. And so it overshoots, it inflames the whole tissue more than it should, and makes the whole recovery process much slower. So good genes protect us, fast recovery. Bad genes, which many of us have, slow down this whole process, and I cannot train every second day. And so what we can do, thankfully, is use nutrition to fix these genetic issues that we have. So for one, oxidative stress. So if my genes don't protect me from free radicals, there are certain nutrients that can do the same thing. One of them is alpha lipoic acid, another one is vitamin E, and another one is vitamin C. So those are typically what we call antioxidants, so anti-free radical substances. And this can fix the issue that we have if the genes don't work in the way. So if the genes don't protect me, let's do it with the nutrients. The second thing, the inflammation, if the genes make my immune system too aggressive, we need to do two things. Number one, we need to reduce pro-inflammatory nutrition. Arachidonic acid, that's present in some types of food. If you have this issue, you should reduce it. It's specifically in certain types of meat, because that would make your immune system even worse. And the second thing is we need to increase anti-inflammatory substances such as omega-3, fish oil or algae oil, and MSM, which is organic sulfur. So those two are anti-inflammatory. So they counteract the too aggressive priming of the immune system. So by a high dose of this and high dose of this, we can compensate for genetic issues that we find. And if we don't have an issue, we don't need high doses. And if we have a genetic issue, we need to compensate with right nutrients. So that's the principle of recovery, speeding up recovery, very, very critical for an athlete. The next one is injury risks. Now, genes play a surprisingly strong story in this. So you can see general injuries, soft tissue injury, muscular injuries, lots of different types of injury we can estimate. And typically, the reason why genes play a role here is because these genes, they are a structural protein. They're kind of one of the structural elements of creating strong tendons, for example. If the gene doesn't work, the tendon becomes weaker and that increases the risk of it ripping. And so that is why specific genes can increase, or gene defects can increase the likelihood of certain injuries. And so you will get information on the report. So rotator cuff tear is very high risk, but cruciate ligament injury is a very low risk. So you will find out what the different risks are that you have. And just to show how relevant this is, a study looked at 289 soccer players, and they just looked at one of the many genes that we measure. And it's called Col5A1. It's a collagen gene, so it's a structural protein. And they looked at this gene, they tested it in all of the soccer players, and then they looked at the ones with good genes. They played during that study 36 matches. So that was their career. They played 36 matches. That was the amount of games that could be done within this study. The ones with the genetic defect played 28 matches. That's 28% lower, fewer games than the guys with good genes. And that was due to injuries. So just as one gene defect reduced the number of games that this player could play by almost a third. So one single gene defect reduces your career by 30%, 20%. So it's critical. And that's just one gene. There are many more that cause different types of injuries. So it's important to know about this, to specifically train the weakened areas, do excessive warm-ups to prevent injury from happening. And so you can work towards not having your career impacted by too many injuries where you can't take part in matches. The next thing is sports science. Genetics is a great subject. It has great relevance for athletic performance, but sports science, even without genetics, is relevant, and of course, needs to be covered as well. So we covered that in the process as well. One of the aspects that we talk about, for example, is the quality of protein. Now, protein are the functional machines in our muscles that do work, like contract the muscle and so on. And we are building this protein, especially when we train our muscles and the body needs to build bigger muscles, and we need more and more protein. And protein is built of 20 small, you can imagine it like Lego bricks, 20 different types of Lego bricks. They all have different shapes and different functions. And a protein is just a combination of this. And by putting them together, you get a certain three-dimensional structure, and that does a certain function. So as I said, 20 different types of these Lego bricks exist. Most of them our body can produce ourselves. There are some of these that we cannot, and we need to get them through food. And we call those the essential amino acids. And those are the ones: threonine, methionine, phenylalanine, and so on. So those are the essential amino acids we need through diet. The rest the body can produce. So that also means what I eat must contain these. But in the best of all worlds, it would be in the right ratio of how I need them. Because if you want to build the protein and just one amino acid is missing, you're not going to build the structure. So we actually always need the amino acids in the right balance. And so we looked at the balance in human muscle. So what percentage of amino acids are these essential ones? And then we compare it to the different food sources. And you can see, for example, lamb is quite close. If you go into the more vegan beans, you're already 34% match. Oat is even worse. Algae is missing one amino acid completely, so that's not a good source. And so you can see what kind of quality of protein is good or bad for supplying the nutrients in the right way. You can build muscle with vegan options, but you just need more to make sure that you're getting the right amounts of that. And the program will consider that, but it's important for you to know there's good and bad protein, and we are focusing on supplying the best protein in the best amounts. The next one is fat. There are different types of fats. You will have heard of healthy fats and unhealthy fats. So saturated fatty acids, that's the unhealthy stuff. It has energy. It's still needed for testosterone production, for hormone production, and cell membrane structures. But you should only be eating around 10% of that. So it's not healthy, but we need a bit of it. Most of it should be monounsaturated fatty acid. Again, important for testosterone levels, for insulin sensitivity and anti-inflammatory effects. It's anti-inflammatory, like I explained before. And then there are the polyunsaturated fats, like omega-3. That have muscle protein synthesis, inflammation reduction, cell signaling, and so on. So this is the balance of fats that you should be eating. Not too much of this, not too much of this, but this balance would be optimal. And our goal is to make sure that you're reaching this. And the next one is carbohydrates, the third source of energy. There are slowly digested ones. So you can imagine them as long chains of little sugar molecules, and they need to be cut up into little pieces before they can be absorbed. That takes time. That's starch being absorbed. And then there are fast ones. That's little sugar molecules like fructose that you take, and that directly goes into your bloodstream. There is a use for this, for sprinting, 10 minutes before sprinting, that's the right energy source. This is not going to help you, it's too slow. But for a marathon, that's not going to work because that's just a short-term solution, that's the right one. And so you need to eat the right kind of carbs at the right times. And again, we are focusing on making sure that happens. The next one is amino acid supply. Amino acids cannot be stored by the body. You might have heard of really dedicated bodybuilders that set their alarm clock at night and wake up every 2 hours to eat protein. So it has sound scientific reason for this, because the body is not able to save amino acids. And so if you were to fall asleep and sleep for 8 hours, at the end, you're not going to supply the essential amino acids that you need for the muscle that wants to grow at that time. And so they go overboard and they set their alarm clocks at night. So not being able to store amino acids is an issue. We're not advocating to say you need to eat protein every 2 hours, 24 hours a day, but eating in the right intervals, at least when you're awake, is very critical. For example, if you only were to eat 1 meal per day, the blue line shows the amount of amino acids your muscles would require to grow optimally. And the red line shows you're not supplying any, then you're giving a huge amount, and then that's lost really quickly. So all you've done is let your muscles grow in this short period of time, and that's waste, because you've trained for optimal growth. And so it turns out that 3 is not optimal yet. Beyond 4 meals per day, you're supplying it in continuous amounts, and so you're supplied long-term. There's also a product that we've developed, which is an amino acid slow release concept. So we take the essential amino acids in the balance that the body needs, the human body needs, and it's created in such a way that it's released throughout 8 hours, and that can bridge the time of sleep, and so you don't need to set your alarm clock at night. So there are different ways of getting around this, but at least when you're awake, make sure you get 4 meals rather than just 1 big meal in the evening. And the next one is repetitions to growth stimulus. So repetitions is you get a weight and you do the repetition, you lift it, and you lift it around. If you have the right weight, you can do around 6 to 12 repetitions, and then you're going to run out of steam. And then your muscles are not going to be able to do 1 more repetition, and that is what we call muscle failure. So this is what happens here. Now, if you continue for you not being able to do the last repetition, you're creating extreme amounts of extra fatigue, even though your muscle growth stimulus is only increasing a little. It sometimes makes sense during training in earlier sets that you stop with 2 repetitions in reserve, meaning 2 repetitions before you couldn't do another one, and only for the last one go to the limit, because then it doesn't matter if you fatigue your muscles. So those are all the principles that the program guides you through. And then the big question is, what is my goal? So those are all the principles that the program guides you through. And then the big question is, what is my goal? Now, different athletes have different goals at different times in their career. And our goal was to create a system where every athlete finds himself at every stage in his career, every type of athlete. So we have the build-up phase. So that is where I'm getting better. So one of them could be, I want to train for muscle mass. So there's a whole section just for muscle mass. And if an athlete says, I don't care about science, I just want to know what to do, they go to the section muscle mass and follow those 20 pages. And that's all they need to do. And then they get all of the information of how to optimally train for muscle mass. A different one could be muscle strength. That's very interesting because you would think that's correlated, but no. If you want to go for muscle strength, you would train in a different way. And the program is going to teach you. You might have seen the climbers are actually stronger in pull-ups than bodybuilders because they are optimizing for strength rather than volume. Another one is endurance. So I want to run a marathon. That's a different kind of training again. So you choose which one. You go to the section and it will tell you everything to do just about this. And if that's where you're going to stay all of your athletic career, that's good. Then you never need to worry about the other things. But maybe you would switch over to a different thing. For example, weight reduction. Bodybuilders often use muscle mass growth. They eat too much. They build up muscle quite efficiently, but also fat. And then they need to maintain the muscle and reduce the fat. And so that's one aspect. So they call it cutting. So one aspect, you can go here, how do I train? What do I eat to reduce muscle, reduce fat and maintain muscle mass? And the other option is to replenish storage. So I'm about to run a marathon, so I'm not going to do another marathon the day before. I need to load up my stores, my glycogen stores and my muscles. How do I do that? How much do I train? What do I eat to be in my perfect shape at the time of competition? Then there's competition day. How much do I sleep? What breakfast do I eat? What do I drink? And so on. All of this information of how to get the best out of your competition day is in here. And then there's maintenance. That's outside of your season. You don't want to lose everything you've built up, but you don't want to go overboard. And so how do you train here? So every athlete can find any of these, choose that section, go there, and it will guide him through exactly achieving this specific goal. Good. So all of these questions that I've mentioned before, those are the ones that we want to answer for every athlete in every stage of their career. And we're just going to look at a specific example, and that is muscle mass building. So that's the program. It's called hypertrophy. That's the scientific term. That's when you want larger volume muscles. So anyone that goes to the gym to look better would want this. Every bodybuilder would want this. So this is the muscle growth training. And in here, we're answering all of those questions that I've mentioned. And you can see those are the different sections that we have. So we have your genetic talent, how to train, how to measure progress, how to optimize regeneration, how many calories you need, what micronutrients to eat, what foods to eat, what micronutrients and what sports supplements. All of this specific for your goal of muscle volume growth. And you can just follow these pages and you're all set. So the next one is the cheat sheet. So you can put this in your locker in the gym. So it will summarize all that you need to do. That's your recommendation. We're just going to skip that and look at it in detail. So the first question is your genetic talent. I want to grow bigger muscles. What do my genes say about this? And it turns out I have the tendency for normal muscle volume. There are some people born with the tendency to have bigger ones already in the green area, and there are some that are worse. So it could be better, it could be worse. That's where I stand at the outset. The next one is white or red muscle fibers. Here, I'm lucky. I have lots of white muscle fibers, so that's good for muscle volume. Means marathon is not the right sport for me, but muscle building sports are great. The next one is I have the tendency for higher testosterone levels. Some people are born with lower testosterone, which is unfortunate. So here, this person actually has an advantage over other people they're born with. And so the focus is, these are your genetic traits that we're working with. Some things will be a little harder for you and some a little easier than it is for others. So that's what we're looking at here. So the next one is how to train correctly. As we are working on muscle volume building, we need to choose the repetitions in the right range. And that means if I take weight that I can only lift twice, that's too heavy. If I can lift it 100 times, it's too light. So the job is to pick a weight that you can lift or do the movement in between 6 and 12 times. If you're overshooting, use a heavier weight, and if you can't do 6, use a lighter weight. But that's the range you should be focusing on. Studies have shown up to 30 is okay. It's just a waste of time, but you can also do more volume. But overall, this is typically the range that you would be focusing on. If you're training for strength, by the way, this is where we're going from between 1 and 6. So completely different range here. Good. So we say between 6 and 12 repetitions. I always aim for 9, and all is good. The next question is, how many sets should I do? How many times can I train the same muscle on one training day? And you would do it, lift the weight 9 times, and then you're out of energy. Then you take a short break, and then you do it again. That would be a second set, and then there's a third set. And you could do anywhere between 3 and 6. 6 is already quite hardcore for bodybuilder levels. 3 and 6 sets per muscle group is about the range where you would want to be for optimal muscle volume growth. The next one is muscle fatigue and strength training. So some people have the genetics to have more quickly tiring muscles than others. And so this person is moderately, but lactate, that's something that builds up if you train, and it starts to make your muscles burn. So this person has lower lactate levels, so that's already great for training. So using this, how quickly the person's muscles tend to weaken or tire, we use this information to optimize the break between sets. So if you have no fatigue, you have very short breaks between, and if you have very high fatigue, we need to take bigger breaks because you want every one of your sets to be with as much strength as you can. You don't want fatigue during this aspect. So this is what it could look like. So one set could be like this. So you stopped 2 repetitions before failure, and then you do a break, 1 minute 30 seconds. Then the next set, again 2 before failure, and only the last one you would do until failure, as it doesn't matter anymore if you build up fatigue here, and it also gives you information of how much you really can still do if you think you're close to failure. Then how do you measure progress? Quite simple. You want something that's called progressive overload. So you either want to be able to do more repetitions with the same weight compared to last time. That means you've improved, or you can increase your weight. So those 2 things. So either you do more repetitions with every training, or you go up in weight. That's the 2. And you should see at least weekly progress with your training. Otherwise, you're doing things wrong. The next one is deload. So what you want to do is sometimes give your body the ability to recover. There are always some kind of injuries that your body is struggling to heal, and if you're going hard continuously, that's tough. It's also mentally quite tough, so it makes sense to do a deload week in certain amounts to also reduce stress and keep motivation up. So there are a lot of advantages of why to do this, and there are some aspects that we're looking at. So your immune system slows recovery somewhat, so we're in the middle here. But we have good protection against free radicals, normal creatine kinase levels, and balanced mental type. These people can handle stress much better than these people. This person is in the middle, so mental aspects are something we need to consider here. And so depending on all of this information, we would say every 5 weeks do a deload week. For some people it's 3, for some it's 7. So it's really focusing on trying to take your genetic traits and take the balance of when to do this deload based on your genetic type. So how does it work? On the first, it's just 1 week. On the first day, you do half the weight, 4 to 5 repetitions, 1 to 3 sets. On the second training day, so that's the 3rd day in the week, then you do 2/3 of the weight, and then on the 3rd you go back to 4. So it's essentially just half the weight, and you work yourself up back to that, and that gives your body the time to heal and keeps your motivation up and working. Then the big question, I have sore muscles, should I train? The answer is no. We talk about the immune system and free radicals again. The next one is, how much should I eat? Now, this is different for different goals. One of them, if your goal is muscle volume growth, you need to have a surplus, so eat too much. Because the best possible muscle growth happens If your body knows I have too much energy anyway, I can invest all of it, all that I want into my muscle growth. If you were to be in a diet, so in a deficit, it really needs to consider, is it really worth investing the little energy that I have into growing muscles? And so typically, other than noob gains, typically you will not build much muscle if you're really in a deficit. So having a surplus is optimal for maximum muscle volume growth. So what we do is we calculate what your basic metabolic rate is. That's based on your height, and there are some formulas that can calculate that. Then we ask you questions of how much exercise you do. So we add those on average to your day, and then we need a 10% calorie surplus. So that will be 207 calories. That's how many extra calories this person should be eating, and that gives this person 2,200 calories to eat for training. So that's a start. It's going to be quite accurate, but not 100%. And that is why we need to track if you're achieving the right kind of goals. So your goal is 10% calorie surplus, but that means you should be gaining 350 grams of weight, so almost a pound per week. That's your goal. You should be weighing yourself 4 times a week to find out if this is the kind of gain that you have. If you gain more than that, then you should eat a little less. If you gain less than that, you should increase your intake. So you need to fine tune this. The calculation is just a starting point, and you should be gaining around 3.5 or 350 grams per week for optimal muscle volume. The next one is protein. How much protein do I need? As I said, those are the building blocks of my muscles. And studies have shown beyond 1.6 grams per kilograms per day, muscle growth does not seem to be sped up if you increase further. So somewhere in the range of 2 grams per kilograms body weight per day is the sort of range that athletes that want to progress typically adhere to. So we make sure that you reach that. And the next one is how much protein does that mean? As I've explained before, we have 2 options. We have high quality protein from animal sources that have the right balance. So if I eat my amount of protein, I get the right amino acids in the right balance. If I want to go vegetarian or vegan, completely possible. Just the quality of the protein is going to be not quite optimal for human muscle. So what you need to do is you eat more of it, because if one source is very low in a certain amino acid, if you eat more, you're just getting more of it, and then you can still build your human muscle. So that means if you want to go with the animal-based diet, you would need 112 grams for this person. And if you want a plant-based diet, you would just go higher, so more protein. That also means you're missing a little bit of extra calories that you can invest in the third source. That would be carbohydrates that we're going to come to later. So again, you can be vegetarian or vegan or meat-based, and this will give you the right amount to eat. So fats. As we said, the different types of fats you should be following and how many grams, it's all calculated based on your specific requirements. And now, as I said, so fat is stable. The protein amount in meat-based is lower than in a meat-less nutrition. And so the rest, we want to fill up with carbohydrates. We have more carbohydrates in a meat-based diet and a little fewer carbohydrates in a meat-less diet, because we just need to eat more protein. So that's the difference here. So it will tell you how many carbs you can eat through this. Okay, so in total, that now means that's your amounts, that's your surplus that you should be eating. You're eating 4 times a day, as we've learned before. And it just shows you how much protein, carbs, and fat you should be eating. You can use an app that tracks your nutrition. That's one approach. You can do this by paper, or you can follow the program as we created. So the next step is, how do we now change your diet to follow this? And we came up with a very simple way of how to do this. We have a food list of 900 different types of food, and we rate these foods based on your athletic performance potential. Does this food give me the nutrients that I need, the fuel that I need to achieve my goals? And so we have different ratings. So it could be very positive. So we would have 6 green trophy symbols. So that's good. Many trophies that are green are good. A little less good, or it can get red. And the more red, the worse. The more green, the better. So you would just go and look at all of the different types of food, pick out the green ones, and those are the ones you want to eat. How does the principle work? So we give it points, every type of food. So we check in the food and we ask, does it contain the right amino acids? So good quality protein gets more plus points. So that would mean it's more green items for you. The next one, does it contain the right macronutrients? The good fat, not the bad fat, and so on. Does it contain the right form of carbohydrates, the slow versus fast? The right form of fats? Does it contain enough calories? Also important. We want it to be fuel for my exercise, so it needs to contain calories, which is, of course, the complete opposite of what you want to do during weight loss. You want to reduce your amount of calories that you get and still feel full. Here, we want to make sure you get the right nutrients in the right balance, as available as possible to fuel your athletic performance. So it's a completely different goal that we're following here. And the next one is, does it contain negative substances? Alcohol, for example, would be negative. And so if it has largely plus or minus points, the food is being rated, and you would go through the 900 types of food and just follow the ones that are green, and you're doing everything right for growth. Good. The next one is micronutrients. Your genes will tell us which nutrients you can work with, which ones you're missing. As we've learned, antioxidants, if your genes don't protect you, anti-inflammatory substances, if your genes are too aggressive with your immune system. And so we get the exact dose of every single nutrient. This is mixed with any other analysis that we did from you. So if we have more information about you, this will consider all of that, not just sports. And so each dose is exactly based on your requirements for your intense exercise. And then the next one is sports supplements. So there are supplements that make sense, that are not part of a micronutrient mix that you would take before training, for example. So creatine is a big one. So we have looked at all of the ones that make scientific sense and calculated the amount based on your body weight. So these are personalized amounts. You will have to source them somewhere else to get the supplement itself. But these are the amounts that would be recommended and that make sense for this specific goal. So there are different ones for different goals again. So this explains the whole concept. As I said, it's 500 pages. You get one whole book that just tells you everything about your genetics. You get one book that explains the basics of sports science and all of the different goals that you could follow, and then you just go to that section and follow that goal. And so in total, this program is very, very comprehensive and allows you to train specifically for your strength and get the best out of your training. Now, it's important to know that this is not I'm a CEO, I want to be mentally performing. That's not what we're looking at here. We're looking here at muscle performance and so on. And also, if somebody says, well, I know I need to exercise because I want to lose weight, that's not something where this test is a good idea, because we're really looking at an individual that wants to improve their performance by a few percent. I'm, for example, an indoor climber. I will never take part in any competition, but I still want to get a little better and do this wall that I couldn't do before. And so it would absolutely apply to me. Somebody who says, I'm training for a marathon, perfect. They want to be faster, they're going to measure it. That's a great use case. If you have a child that wants to become an athlete, to do a test to find out what sort of training makes sense, because that's where the talents lie, absolutely makes sense. If it's just sport for fun, then it doesn't make sense to do this test. So really use it in the cases where people ask themselves, how can I get better in the sport that I do? If that's the question, this is going to help you answer this.